Hi, I'm Jamie Seaman. I am the Executive Director of Integrated Marketing Communications at the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh campus. And since I'm among friends, I'm going to tell you the biggest pet peeve I have is my office is called Integrated Marketing and Communications. I don't know why they put the "and" in there. It's always been a pet peeve. I only tell you that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Integrated Marketing Communications, how we implemented it at our Oshkosh campus. It's interesting enough, I was actually a student in the IMC program here at West Virginia University when we were implementing IMC on our campus at UW Oshkosh. So it was a really great experience for me to be involved in implementing it there while I was earning my degree at it. It made my capstone project actually really interesting because I did another one in parallel with it for my campus. So anyway, I didn't get extra credit for that though. So we're here to talk about IMC, what that means at a campus level, and what really makes it unique in the realm of higher education. I think there's a lot of obviously similarities with IMC in any industry, but there are some unique challenges that we have in higher education. So I'm also going to then give you some of the tactical strategies that we implemented on our campus that, you know, these are 6 ideas that you could probably just steal if you wanted to, that really focuses on collaboration and some tools that you can use to help keep your brand consistent in a decentralized environment like a campus. So out of respect for our program, I took this right off of the IMC website, the definition of integrated marketing communications. And I think it really varies. There are so many definitions of IMC, and then there's some definitions of what IMC is specifically in higher education. But I wanted to just give you kind of the general gist of what IMC is. And from my perspective, what really stands out and is important to me is that it's data-driven, it's focused on research, it's relevant, which by virtue of being data-driven, it becomes relevant to the audience, and it's comprehensive, and it crosses all channels, which is really great in theory. Try doing that in higher education. We live in a very complex world. Just out of curiosity, is everybody in here work in some realm of higher education now? Not? Raise your hand if you're not. You're just interested in it, or it's interesting. So there's no question that we have to do it. And if you're not in higher education, you may not be aware of the fact that it is becoming increasingly more competitive. And I don't just mean that because there's a lot more schools popping up and there's the for-profit and the online. There is less students out there today than there was 5 years ago. That we're in, if you look at the graph of students graduating high school right now, we're in, I think, year 5 of an 18-year dip before we get back to where we were. So not only is there more campuses out there, there's less students out there. So because of that, we've had to get much more deliberate in how we communicate. And that was a really new concept, especially for my campus. And you know, just to give you a funny story, when we first started rolling this out and I landed on campus, this was about 5 years ago, one of the first things I did is I pulled together a group of people from across campus to kind of talk about who our audiences were. And I knew who our audiences were. I just needed campus to tell me who our audiences were. And so there was a faculty member who was acting as an interim dean for one of our colleges at the time. And I asked the question, who are our audiences? And he raised his hand and he said, well, the students are already here. So our audiences are really the current students, faculty, and staff. Like, I think I literally tilted my head. Like, the students are already here. Where did they come from? Where did they fall out of? And it was like this insightful moment for me of, they just don't understand that it's competitive and we need to recruit these students. They don't just materialize. And in fairness to him, it was a relatively new idea. The students really did just come. Well, they don't anymore. And so we have to be, again, more deliberate in our communications and how we recruit. We all have less resources, and if you pay attention to state budgets and any of that, whether or not you're in or out of higher education, state budgets for higher education tend to be going down. In Wisconsin, if you pay any attention to Wisconsin, this year has been the worst one yet. We just got gutted. So there's less resources. Inconsistent messaging impacts the core reasons that communication exists. Recruitment, retention, and outreach, those are the key things that we need to focus on in our university world. And if you have inconsistency across channels, you're impacting all 3 of those areas. And reputation management. Everyone knows, I think, if you don't take control of your own reputation, people will absolutely manage it for you. So we have to be very assertive about maintaining our reputation. And my school particularly was digging themselves out of a hole. We are UWO, UW0. We were UW0, and we had a terrible reputation out there. And so one of the reasons that we've implemented it was for that, really was for the reputation aspect of what we had to do. So how do we do it? We have a brand, this brand umbrella, and again, this is not unique to higher education. There are many channels, increasing channels constantly. We're hearing about social media constantly through this. The amount of ways that we can get our message out is just increasing continually. So trying to get your arms around that for any organization is really challenging. When you also then look at, from a campus perspective, how many people are communicating, when you look at fundraisers, marketing people from a central communications office, marketing people at the colleges and programs. We did an audit when we were kicking this off. We had, I want to say, 120 people on our campus alone, which we're not that big of a campus. We have about 14,000 students. But about 120 people that had some form of communications responsibility within their position description. So you have that many people that you're trying to get your arms around, some sort of consistency around. That's really challenging. But again, that's not really unique to higher education either. I mean, any large organization has people doing communications. I mean, look at Nike, probably has thousands of people that they're trying to manage. So that's not unique either. But what's really unique about higher education is the culture that we live in within a higher education environment. If anyone has ever gone to a dean's office and sat in front of him and asked him or told him what to do, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't get to tell a dean what to do. You don't get to tell a faculty member what to do. We use words like buy-in and transparency. It's an entirely different world where you need to get people on board with what you're doing because you don't just get to tell them what to do. So that's really that's really what I would say is the biggest unique factor of trying to implement IMC within higher education. So I'm going to tell you my story for about 5 minutes, I hope. I'm not going to get too much into our brand development because, even West Virginia University this morning, they gave a great presentation on what you need to do for brand, and we went through that. But what I really want to focus on is really the tactical IMC model that we've been putting up. So we were a very traditional department, rewind about 7 years ago when our transformation began. We were very traditional. We were focused on media relations, publications, design, photography. We were called the press release factory. We sent out press releases for everything, whether it was an event or a large-scale initiative, it was a press release. And as late as, I think it was 2007, our news director was still physically printing them and mailing them to the newspapers because he thought that was a better way to get their attention. So we were traditional, to say the least. We focused on publications. We had our main publications that came out of our office, which was our view book, our annual report, bulletins, and our magazine. Beyond that, we were doing some sort of marketing pieces for people. There was really no strategy behind it. We were creating logos for any department that asked for one, so we were really just perpetuating our problem ourselves. So our chancellor had actually realized that he needed to get control of this, so he was really the instigator behind getting things going from an IMC perspective. So he likes to tell the story about how he spent a summer reading a book by Bob Sevier, if you've ever heard of him. He's from Staymates, and he literally wrote the book on IMC and higher education and how you implement it. So he had read through several of Sevier's workbooks on how to get it going on our campus. So then he charged a team kind of pulled together the plan of how we were going to move forward with IMC, and then a director was hired and we moved forward. So what we knew we needed to do was to align our messaging back to our core mission, our values, all the things your authentic brand should be, which is tied to who you are as an institution. We had to create a really clear image, and we had to get control of our reputation. We needed to have a much more contemporary look of, actual physical look, and we had to shift campus culture on what it means to have a brand and maintain a brand. So we really had two large initiatives going at the same time. We had our brand development process, which was I prefer to actually, and Severe actually puts it best. He says that, developing a brand isn't really the right word for it. You should really be talking about how you discover your brand. And that what you're really doing is uncovering who you are as an institution. You discover it, and we actually used those words when we rolled out our brand identity. We discovered this brand together. And so it helps in that buy-in aspect of things, but you shouldn't be just developing a brand out of nowhere. You should be identifying who you are and finding the right way to communicate that. So we had our brand development going on at the same time that we were trying to figure out the infrastructure of our IMC department so that we could, once we have this new brand identity, that we would be structured in a way that we could actually maintain it and keep momentum going on it. So that's what I'm going to focus on more. So again, from the brand discovery aspect of things, not to belabor it, we had gone through a very methodical process. It started with market research. We did a large-scale perception analysis on all of our key stakeholders, found out what people thought of us. We kind of paired that with what we knew ourselves to be, what we wanted our brand to be, and that we knew from our marketing or our communications standpoint then what we needed to do to get those in line. And the perception of us wasn't where we needed it to be, so we knew we had to get those in alignment. So we also had to we did an audit internally of all the people who do marketing communications, all of the logos that we had out there. We had, I want to say, almost 100 different logos on our little campus alone that we had to rip out of people's hands. We had to figure out how many dedicated resources were out there for communications, knowing that down the road we were going to have to start pulling those people in. So then we started our internal brand development. We made a conscious decision to not outsource any of our brand development. We wanted to keep it in-house, so again, we could say the words, we built this together. So again, I'll just kind of fly through this. Buy-in is such an important part of being in the higher education culture. People had to feel like they were a part of it, and people had to have opportunity to have a voice in it. And we did that in a very careful way so that people weren't voting on what our logo was going to be. People weren't voting on, this didn't go through governance for voting. And if you don't know what governance is, you're so lucky. We made it was a very conscious decision to choose how we incorporated feedback. So we would do focus groups, and people understood that they were part of a focus group. So the campus community is a very important audience. We focus group them and ask them to weigh in on our logo and our tagline and all of those fundamental pieces. But they weren't voting on it, and then we made it very clear when we were going through the process that this isn't a vote. You're a key audience. We will go towards what resonates with all of our audiences. So faculty, you may like this logo. Everybody else like this one, sorry. Leveraging senior leadership, I would say, was probably the biggest part of our success. And again, you have to really balance not making it feel like it's a top-down approach that your chancellor or your president's telling you that he's making this happen or she's making this happen, but the campus has to know that leadership buys in on it. And when it starts at the top and the vice chancellors or vice presidents get involved in it, then the deans get involved in it, it makes it go much more smoothly. So when the faculty understands that their dean is actually encouraging this, it makes that much easier for us. And then it's on us to talk with them and explain to them the value of what it is that we're trying to do. But it went more smoothly knowing that they knew that at least senior leadership was on board with it. So we had to be transparent, open up for opportunities for feedback, blah, blah, blah. We had to deliver some quick wins early on just so that people understood what it was that we were trying to accomplish, so they could see the quality of the work that was going to be put out there, so they could get behind it a little bit. So that was important, but again, you have to balance how many quick wins do you put out there before you're starting to take your resources in the wrong direction. But we needed people to see that momentum was happening. So here's where we are today. And this isn't an org chart, this is a functional responsibilities. So now we're an IMC department, IMNC department. We have what I call multi-channel marketing. And it took a little time to evolve our department from being print, and then web was out of all of this process, the only new resources we got was a web team. So we brought 3 people in who were web people. So we actually started out having a web programmer and a web designer and a manager for that group. Ultimately, though, we did away with the web designer once our print team actually kind of came together. So then our print designers started doing web, which was a multi-year process, but we got there. So now we're multi-channel marketing. And I like that phrase because it gets people out of the silos. And that took some time for the department internally to get comfortable with, but we really thought it was important, again, from this integrated idea that we're not talking print anymore. We don't have print happening here and web happening here. We have what is it we're trying to accomplish, what are the best channels for that. And at this point, you know, print, from our perspective, print's intent is to drive people to web. We have our news and public relations team. They're no longer just the media relations team. They understand that more what we're doing is public relations than anything. So they're not that old school news director anymore. And so that's where our photography and videography sits. So I'm going to talk a little bit more when we get into the resources, but our advisory groups has become a really important part of the collaboration piece that we have. So if I were to talk about the most important thing when it comes to IMC on a campus, it's the level of collaboration that you have. And so that in our Champions program, and I'll talk about more about those. So that was 5 minutes-ish. Any questions on that piece of it before I dive into some tea? Who first?
You just mentioned the advisory groups. Was that like constituents from around the campus? Are they people who don't necessarily have these roles? Or?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to get into much detail, so I'll tell you. So we have our IMC Advisory Group, which is actually just forming now, and that is going to be purely external people, alumni who have, you know, it's a really good opportunity for us, in my mind, to leverage some of our more high-profile alum who have really high-end communications jobs. So we have an alum who's in communications at Walmart. The founder of Politico happens to be an alum. Harley Davidson, we have an alum there who's going to be on our advisory board for us. The senior editor of ESPN.com, Pat Stigman, he's an alum. He's going to be on our advisory board. So from that, this is, I said, the last group that we're putting together. But I want campus to see that we're reaching out beyond our walls so that they're helping drive our direction of what we're doing from a communication standpoint. And having these kind of high-profile people, I think, is going to help with that. So that's the IMC Advisory Group. The External Relations Group is all internal people, mostly made up of senior staff or advancement officers, anyone who has real outreach responsibility. And that's a group that meets every other month just to kind of talk about the high-level messaging that we're trying to get out, whether it's legislatively or, you know, major initiatives we have going on, so that when people are out and about in the community, we're helping them with the sort of messaging that we're trying to get out. We have our Web Advisory Group, which was formulated years ago when we were starting the process of overhauling our web presence, and that became an incredibly political process. And so having an advisory group that was kind of a campus-wide collection of voices helped with kind of that. Again, that it's not governance and it's an advisory group. People want it to be a governance group, but anyway. So that group actually meets 6 times a year. And then we have an internal communication group, which is made up of people who have a vested interest in getting voice out to campus. So a lot of student affairs offices, university police, IT, like what can we do collectively to reach students and reach people better on campus. So that's, again, everyone's pretty much internal except for the IMC Advisory Group. Did you have a question?
You answered it in that answer.
Okay. Any other? Yeah.
You mentioned buy-in. Can you give some examples about how you were able to get buy-in? Specifically for people who may be resistant to your change?
The best example I have is we have a dean from, we're being recorded, I won't say who. One of our deans was probably the biggest fighter of this whole process. He believed that, you know, our administration is on one side of the street, the colleges and departments are another. He always talks about how across the street, he doesn't like coming across the street. And so he sees that there's this university brand here and there's a college brand here, and the two should not meet. And we were stripping him of his logo, we were stripping him of his ability to do what he needed to do and build his own brand by making him use this new university logo. And so for someone like that, I've spent so many times, so many meetings, so many hours just talking with him about, this isn't me trying to hurt you. If I didn't think this was right for you, I wouldn't do it. So I mean, at this point, he and I actually co-present once in a while on this sort of topic. We have a shared position now that reports half to me, half to him, and sits physically in my office and is a dedicated marketing person for him. He wholeheartedly uses our new logo and understands the difference of it. And because of that, it helps his whole college get more on board with it, what's happening. So really, when it came to getting buy-in, it just became, this exhausting process of meeting with people, having campus forums, having conversations, having, training sessions on why it is we're doing this. Because once people really understood the why, and they didn't, I wasn't just the logo Nazi trying to steal them of their identity. That the why is because if you're using the same logo and the success of the college or the business is then going to help you look better. The reputation you build over here helps the people over here. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts concept. And people really started getting that. So buy-in took time, and this by no means was an easy, simple process that happened in 5 minutes. It was a long process that took a lot of conversations. So.
I was also curious, you talked about reallocating dedicated resources, where a marketing person sits completely in some other decentralized office. Is everyone now completely centralized?
No, we're still decentralized and we'll stay decentralized.
Right.
And I'll go through some of the ways we help those people stay more compliant. And I don't think centralization would necessarily work. And depending on the campus, it might work, but it wouldn't work on ours. And I think it can be effective either way. So no, most of those people stay that way. The relationship I have with Ingrid Dean, that's the first time we actually physically took someone into our office. I actually have lunch next week with another dean who wants to do the very same thing because it works really well from that perspective, but it'll never be campus-wide. Any other questions before I go? Yeah.
Just talk a little more about the quick wins.
An example of a quick win, the very first thing that we launched was a news site. We had a very archaic system of getting news out to campus, and it was called the Bulletin, and it was literally still a printed newsletter that got sent to everyone's desk. And we took that away, which didn't go over well, but we put up a news site, just a very simple WordPress site that became our news site. So then that was a site that was being updated daily, and people were able to kind of see that we were moving forward in a bit more modern direction of getting communication out. So that's a quick win. That was probably our largest quick win. Anything else before I give you my 6 ideas? Yeah.
From someone who's in a position of marketing in a college and not in the central part of marketing and kind of lower level, how would I kind of suggest a more centralized approach to marketing at my university? Or is that not a good suggestion?
No, obviously I believe in it. It's surprising that they're not taking a lead on that. Well, let me go through some other things that we do from our campus to pull people in like you, and maybe you can reverse it, and I'll circle back if I don't answer your question. Okay, so I'm going to go through. These are probably what I would consider our biggest successes in using IMC as a communications model and what we need to do to get campus collaborating together with us to keep our brand momentum going. And I'm going to go through each one of these individually, so I'm not going to read the slide here. So our account liaison system, to me, I go back and I think what was the most monumental thing that we did when we were trying to roll out IMC, and it was our account liaison system. We started talking about ourselves like we are a central marketing agency on campus, and we assigned actual account managers. We call them liaisons. People don't like the word management. So we call them liaisons, but it was essentially they became an account manager. So everyone in my department who has the skill set for it was assigned multiple clients. So some of our main audiences, such as each of the colleges, admissions, all of the key areas on campus was assigned a person. And why I think this was so important, and what they do is they're the central person, just like an account manager would be. They are the one person that you can call if you have any sort of question, if you don't know how to fill out a request form, if you need someone to come to your strategic planning meetings, if you just have no idea where to even start, what does IMC do, you have a person to call. And the reason why I think this was so effective is because we were finding kind of two things. We were fighting this history of being a black hole, and we had a really bad perception on campus of it. So we had to fix some of the perceptions that we had on campus of what we were historically, the old school press release factory and projects. We were a black hole. It was a big old mess. So we had to fix that. And then we also had a large percentage of campus that just had no idea that we were even a resource that was available to them. And so without us proactively going out and talking to these people, they weren't going to come to us. They didn't even think they could come to us. And so by assigning people from our office to proactively reach out to them, we got all of these like light bulb ahas, like you're actually someone I can use, and I don't have to do this brochure myself, and like, please don't do that brochure yourself. So this is probably the most monumental thing that we put in place that really showed a proactive approach to reaching out to people, and this is probably the reason why our project load has gone from about 200 projects a year to last year we had 700 projects, because we were reaching out and proactively asking for them. Not that those 700 projects didn't happen on campus, but now we get to do them, and we have control over what they look like, and they're not these terrible old brochures. So that's probably the most monumental thing that we did. Our project management system, we were a black hole. People had no idea how to ask for projects. They would email whoever they knew in the department. You know, bless their hearts, they would try, but they didn't know that things would get lost. And we were set up then too internally as an assembly line. And so a writer would start a project, they'd work with the client, figure out what they want, they'd write the text would be fine, it would go to the designer. Well, now the designer is the person working with the client. And the designer wants to go in a different direction with it. This is clearly too many words, let's cut it, I think it should go here. Our designers called themselves artists, and that's how they acted. And it wasn't necessarily that this had to be a functional marketing piece, it should be beautiful, which is why there shouldn't be so many words. And so it was this horrible back and forth within our own department to get these projects done. This project would take too long, blah, blah, blah. It was a broken system. And so one of the things then we did was we put together an official project management system. We defined teams as projects come in. There's a project manager, there's a writer, there's a designer. Sometimes it's the designer if it's a design-heavy project. Sometimes the project manager's a writer. But there was one person. That's the only person that gets to talk to the client. You're required to have a requirements gathering meeting with the client. Don't just dive in and do it the way you want to do it. It was an entirely different approach to actually managing projects. And so we use an online project management tool now that actually allows us to set up projects with a project plan, assign resources to it, keep with timelines. It allows me then to actually see from a resource standpoint what's on everybody's plates. It's really streamlined our office because now we can actually assign projects to people based on their workload. It's unintentionally improved morale in the office because when you have a stack of projects on your desk, you think you've got it really bad. So I would have constant meetings with people like, I can't take on any more projects. And you'd go through and be like, well, this one's not due for 9 months. This one's not due for 6 months. Nobody had a good view of their own project load. So now they can see I'm actually fine. And so I don't have those conversations with people anymore. So it just became this really nice way of streamlining how we run projects. And we're not a black hole anymore.
Do you use a specific tool for that kind of management?
Yeah, it's an online tool called WorkZone. It's pretty inexpensive and it does what we need it to do. Not to be a commercial for a product, but that's what we use. So then we created an online toolbox, and this goes back to the idea that we'll never be centralized. And so what we needed to be able to do is make sure that there was all the tools out there available for people so that they can manage the brand as well. And so we put in very easy service request forms, online forms that are essentially a creative brief, event submissions if they want us to help promote an event. We have all kinds of tools for people to check out, like pull-up banners and tablecloths, and so when they're going to events, they can look polished and brand ready. We have print templates, and so we created this online library of the fully functional InDesign files that someone can just download, plop in some images and text, and have a beautiful trifold brochure or a poster or a postcard, so that with minimal training, if they had the right tool, they could make brand compliant pieces themselves. The brand guidelines are available online. We also gave everybody hard copies of the brand guidelines so that they were aware of them. We were blogging, we have media resources, we have faculty resources. So we just wanted our website to be a robust place for people to go so that they themselves can have the tools they need to be compliant. So that's been really helpful. People love those print templates. I love those print templates. Our brand champion program. This isn't necessarily unique to our campus, but I think it's an incredibly effective way to get buy-in across campus, to get people to understand that they are a part of it, that the marketing department isn't the only one responsible for the brand, that everybody on campus has a role in it. We're all responsible for our own reputation. And so we took this to the level of having training. When I said, earlier on, we had over 120 people that had some sort of communications in their role. When we launched the new brand, those people were required to come through brand training. And we called it brand champion training. We even debated getting capes made. We made it feel important enough too. Our chancellor came and he would, at the end, do the grip and grin and give them a certificate afterwards. We wanted people to understand how important it was to be a brand champion, and that their job in being a brand champion is to, communicate authentically, be a part of the brand, communicate our distinctiveness in all of your communications, and be an advocate for it. That when you go back to your college and your unit or your program, be an advocate for what it is that we're trying to do, and be able to articulate why it is that we're trying to do it so that we weren't the only voices. When it comes to branding, in my humble opinion, the easy part is the visual consistency. The really challenging part is the brand messaging. And trying to get your arms around that with all of the content that goes out the door is just crazy. And we ourselves, in my own department, kind of ignored it for a while we were really getting our arms around the visual consistency. So the latest thing that we've really been focused on and will be focused on now that we're at the point where we can be is our content strategy. So we literally locked ourselves in a room last summer and over about 12 hours over several days, and we outlined, based on our brand platform, what we know that makes us distinctive, what content do we need to be telling on a regular basis, and how do we tell it. We went through every venue that we have to push content out. We identified the purpose of it, and we slashed a few that were just redundant, or we didn't need them, or they just weren't effective anymore. So we slashed a few. We honed in on the ones that we really need to focus on, and then we literally put a schedule of content. We know that our faculty makes us distinctive. We need to be telling faculty stories. We need to be telling research stories because people don't think of us as a research institution. So we went through and we put together the physical schedule of this is the frequency of it. We have it in our work zone calendar now of we need to be featuring a student profile. Let's find a profile of a student that fits our brand. And why I use a calendar is because your brand platform really becomes the filter for what it is the stories that you're going to tell. And we have 14,000 students, 2,000 faculty and staff. There's a lot of stories we could be telling. When you have that much content possibility, which stories do you tell? Well, it all should tie back to your brand platform and what it is that makes you distinctive so that you're telling the stories that actually help you stand out. So that was our content strategy. And so we took our brand champion idea then to the next level so that we could help support the content strategy campus-wide. And this has been working out phenomenally well. So now we have what we call our story champion group. And so separate from our brand champions, although they're the same people most of the time, we now have a weekly story champion meeting where people who are primary communicators in their area meet with us and tell us what's going on in their school. And they have a vested interest to be there every week because if they're not there, their stories aren't going to get told. And so at this point, we average about 20 people a week that come into our office and meet with us and tell us what's going on. So whether they're going to write the story themselves or they're going to make the video or whatever, they come weekly and they talk about it. And it's taken our collaboration to a whole new level. And people are talking with each other. Departments that don't typically meet that frequently are now hearing what everybody else is doing. So now, our student union is listening to what athletics is doing, and they're collaborating themselves better, and our content's just getting richer and richer. So this has been our most recent biggest success, I would say. And I say it's mandatory. is as mandatory as it can be in higher education. And the way I'm trying to keep it mandatory is staying in front of our leadership team and our deans to continually encourage people to come. I don't think it's necessary because people are coming on their own, but their deans are encouraging them to go. You know, one person doesn't want to be there, but her dean's making her. But so it is. But it's incredibly. It's giving us really rich content that we never had before. Training, collaboration. This is another aspect of what I would consider the success, because this idea of IMC in higher education is really about collaboration. And when we first launched our brand guidelines, what we were doing was having regular training workshops on varying topics like best practices in web content writing, how to design within our brand guidelines. Training, IMC standing in front of you, telling you, imparting knowledge to you. We've now evolved beyond that to what we call our champion chats. And so now the idea is this is no longer IMC telling you and teaching you. It's let's all talk together about what it is you're doing. So anytime an invitation goes out for a monthly champion chat, now it's varying topics like what is open records, kind of the functional stuff. How are you using social media? We had one on digital storytelling. So every month we have a new topic that kind of relates to some aspect of communications. And it's intended to be a very collaborative conversation versus a training session. What's been disappointing to me is that people aren't really sharing as much as I thought they would. I genuinely thought it was going to be more of a conversation. They still tend to be leaning on us to be more of a training role, but I'm thinking that'll just evolve over time. We have our UWO social group, which is a collaboration around social media. So people who are managing their accounts for their social media, we have monthly tweet-ups and have, again, varying topics. We've been bringing in outside speakers to educate people on social media. And the reason we kind of broke off, and it sounds like we have so many things going on, but the reason we broke off social media separately is because people are just so hungry for information about social media. And I think that's going to go on for a while, so we just wanted to make sure that we're giving people as much information as they want about social media. And we're bringing in outside speakers, so it's not just us kind of preaching that. We're bringing in outside speakers to kind of bring in some more credibility. So we call that UWO social. So then workshops and blogging, I already mentioned. From a visual consistency standpoint, and I think this is my last idea for you. This is the most controversial. This is the one that people dislike the most. When we launched our new brand guidelines, we made it required that anytime anybody sends anything off campus, if you're going to do the piece yourself, because we are decentralized, if you're going to do the design yourself, we need to see it before it goes out. And that people have still fight today. But not only is it effective because we can make sure that they're compliant with, our logo usage, blah, 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 but we really help people. And I think now that people realize that the feedback we give them is really helpful, it's gone a long way with this. I mean, for example, we would get brochures that didn't have any sort of call to action. There was no phone number, there was no website, there was nothing. It's like, well, what do you want people to do with this? And so once people started understanding that, it's just a fresh set of eyes on the work that they were doing, it became much more widely accepted, but it was ugly for a little while. We actually documented so people understood what it is that we were really looking for in the brand review process, and there's kind of varying stages of brand compliance that you need to be depending on what the piece was. So if admissions was creating a piece that was going out to prospective students, that needed to be very core UW Oshkosh branded. Same with anything that was going out to alumni. That has to fit very closely within our brand guidelines. But a college then, colleges have kind of their own sub-brand. Well, they don't get their own logo. They have look and messaging, and they can lead with their college. And our UW Oshkosh logo can be more secondary. Versus an event, maybe an annual sort of thing, they have a lot more creative freedom with that sort of thing. So we had to make sure that we outlined that so that we were transparent in what it is that we were looking for, and they knew what to expect when they sent something for brand review. Any questions about any of the ideas? No. Measuring success. So these are the actual This is what, when the chancellor charged the group of people to come up with what IMC was going to look like on our campus, this is what he said we needed to be able to answer. Has the public's awareness, accessibility, and appreciation of our campus improved? Yes. Has the financial condition improved? Yes. Have specific marketing goals been reached? Yeah, and he will say this open heart. He's like, yes, yes, yes on all of these. We've been incredibly successful. And what I mean is we've been experiencing record enrollment. So even in the decline of physical human beings out there, we are still on track this coming fall for another record year. We've been having record enrollment. This stuff just works. We've had record alumni engagement. I mean, just as simple as if you look at the attendance at our homecoming event, it's just going up exponentially every year. We have, anecdotally, we would send out our alumni magazine, and they would have to beg for people to have some sort of comments so they could print in the letter to the editor, like responses. It was sad. And now they just get a plethora of responses because people are actually reading the magazine. I remember one alumni I ran into in an event. They said, I love the new magazine. I'm surprised you didn't have a magazine before. Like, you've been getting a magazine for years. They just didn't know it. They didn't look at it. So alumni engagement is up. Public and private support, we've had record donations. We've been able to build 3 new buildings on campus. Our alumni, or our donor relations is going phenomenally well. Our media relations, the placements that we get, not even just regionally but nationally, is just through the roof. And I feel like we've aligned our image and our identity, and what we're going to do now this coming year is redo our perception analysis. It's been long enough now that to look at how far we've come using that original market research as a benchmark. We're going to see now how did we do and how would we move the needle on that. So we've definitely got our arms around, I think, our institutional reputation, and there's obviously a sense of pride that goes along with that. What's really interesting too when you talk to alumni, and it hadn't even occurred to me that people would think this way. When they talk about the UW 0 days compared to what we are today, an alumni said it to me, and my mouth probably dropped open, was, well, UW Oshkosh wasn't a good school when we went there. And what's interesting about that is that the school itself hasn't changed at all. We still have the same amount of award-winning faculty. I mean, everything's really the same. The only difference is how we're talking about ourselves. But they see that as a shift in the institution itself. So it's a really powerful result to think that people now believe that the institution has changed when we just weren't communicating it in the appropriate way. So my own personal plug is this work actually got us the very first Marketer of the Year for Higher Education Award. So that is all I have. Any questions? Yeah.
It's very impressive what you've accomplished in a short period of time, but since it obviously takes a long time to invest in higher education and encourage and actually support a cultural shift, currently, what is your biggest challenge that you have yet to overcome?
Wow, that's a hard one. In fairness, we're 7 years into it, so I mean, this has been a very lengthy process, and there's certainly still outliers out there that we fight with. I could tell you a college, but I won't, that absolutely just still refuses to work with us. I mean, we still have ways to go with kind of individual groups. I would say our biggest challenge is still our perception among faculty. I just can't seem to move the needle on their opinion of us, that we're uncollaborative and we're Nazis. And is time up? Oh, do you have a question? So I would say my biggest challenge right now that I'm really focused on, and we'll go into the fall with this idea, is changing the perception of faculty around us. Because again, not having faculty support in what we're doing, it's certainly impactful, and we need to get them on board. So that's probably the biggest challenge and probably the slowest moving piece of all of that. Yeah.
If you want to engage us, faculty, one of the best things you can do is create us as experts, put together an expert book, come to us, showcase us. We have egos. Anything you want to use us for, you've got us on your side. That's the best way to make us your friends.
I agree, and honestly, it's part of the challenge that we've had is that we've been trying to do that very thing. And when I talked about our content strategy and the schedule that we have, well, we want every 2 weeks we want a new faculty feature, whether it's a faculty-student interaction sort of story, or a faculty research, or just a faculty grant or whatever. We just can't get the stories, and it's just, and I don't know again if it's part of the perception of working with us, or that it's time intensive for them to tell us the stories in the first place, especially if it's a research story that we're not going to probably get the gist of. So thank you, it's an effort, we're trying. Yes.
Do you work with contractors on your campus, and how is that relationship with integrating them seamlessly into your campus?
What do you mean by contractors?
For instance, I'm a marketing director of food service, contracted with the university. So my question is basically, how do you bridge that gap and work together to make sure that dining program, or whatever that contractor is seamlessly, it might be a bookstore or something like that, is seamlessly integrated into what your vision is, and you both are getting something out.
That's a challenge. We haven't necessarily worked directly with our dining. It's a third party. But it's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought about them yet. The bookstore is a challenge, and that's in that they really have complete creative freedom that to me is at the detriment of our brand. And their argument, of course, is that they need to sell apparel, and if I put this logo on this pink shirt, she's not going to buy it. And I don't necessarily buy that, but so that's a bigger challenge too, is getting, especially when there's no real actual accountability to our office. It's certainly a challenge. So again, it just becomes, where's the compromise, where's the middle ground, and can you at least try this and demonstrate to me that what you're saying is true? Because I believe you. I just would really like to understand better. So that's certainly a challenge.
The story ambassador folks, so they are communications people who work for the dean, is that?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, out of the colleges, yes, they all report generally to their dean. We have admissions who comes, our student wellness area, our student union comes, so it just depends on.
My question, and I asked a similar question this morning, have you had this circumstance where someone brings you a student or a story, and do you vet that, do you go back to the dean and say, hey, here's what we want to do, and have there been tension there, and how?
I think you've gotten burned by this, I assume.
I'm in the middle of a couple of things, and
Okay.
it's like, okay, I'm hearing stories over here, and then I think, oh, you can't talk about that.
We haven't gotten caught into a situation where somebody hasn't liked a student that we've profiled or featured. Generally, the students that we tend to feature, we're featuring them because they've done something extraordinary in some way, which is why we're featuring them. So the assumption is we have to, in some ways, trust the person bringing us the student that's been vetted. But it's a good point. I mean, we haven't gotten caught in anything yet. But no, we haven't directly. I don't go to the dean and say, is it okay if we feature this person? Yeah, we just have to trust the person.
I was just going to ask, at the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about financial situations and how resources are thinning, and I'm definitely in the same boat there. And you guys seem to be growing, or from what I'm perceiving, your department is handling that. My question is how are you doing that?
We have not gotten any additional resources aside from the very first infusion of staff members. We have not had a budget increase. I would say the biggest success that we've had is becoming much more efficient in the sort of work that we're doing. So again, that project system has been a lifesaver for us, because we could never have done 700 projects a year, not streamlining how we operate. So that alone we haven't gotten to the point where I've been able to demonstrate that we can no longer keep up this workload, and therefore I need more resources. But that's the point of using that project management tool as well, is that when I get to that point, I'm going to have all of the data to support it. I do get infusions of what we call just one-time funding. We have a initiative funding that they call it on campus that we can apply to take some of that money. So I've gotten significant resources. That's typically one-time funding. I'm now in the situation where I was given an influx of money to do a very targeted marketing campaign for admissions. We targeted a new region of Northern Illinois. And it was one-time funding that was given to me for 2 years. Now I'm at the point where I have to ask for that to be permanent, or we're not going to hit our recruitment numbers. So it'll be interesting to see this summer having another budget issue come up, that if I'll get that or not. But so we'll see. But also, because I've been able to demonstrate, I really feel like it's all in the data, and I need to be able to demonstrate the success. So we did a targeted campaign in Northern Illinois. We saw an 86% increase in applications from that region. Give me the money now to make this permanent. And so as of right now, I'm told I'll get it. So it's, again, to get more resources, you have to be taking concern around the data so that you can demonstrate it.
How many people are in your
10. Anything else? Yeah.
For your 700 projects, who are the primary groups and individuals that request your services?
A lot of that is admissions. Who are the big? Yeah, admissions is by far, of course, the biggest user. Our foundation, we do all the foundation projects, so there's a lot there. But then it's individual departments. We have 72 programs and majors, and of the department level, they don't have resources, so we pretty much do everything for all of the, especially in our College of Letters and Science, which is the largest school, that they're usually one-man shows, so we'll do all of the projects for them. So it varies. It's all over the board, but mostly departments and admissions. Anything else? I have no idea what time is it.
So, I have another question. I know you said this in the beginning, but I don't remember what you said. Were you there when they decided, were you already on campus when they decided to start this, or were you hired to do this?
I was the second person in this role. So the original executive director was there. I was one of her first hires, and then when she left, I've taken over. So I've been there since the beginning of after they hired somebody. So that original group was charged by the chancellor in 06 or 07. I think the original executive director was hired in 08, and I was hired later in 08. Anything else? 10 minutes. 10 minutes if you have anything else. Nothing? Okay. Thank you.